Western Ag Network on the road in Orlando, Florida for the Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show. Brought to you by AgRisk Advisors.
This week, Western Ag Network is on the road at CattleCon24. And Russell, I tell you what, it was a very busy week with policy creation, learning about new inventions and innovations in the industry, and overall, a great time to be in the cattle business. That was the theme.
Absolutely. And of course, one of the highlights every year is that CattleFax market outlook and weather outlook session here at CattleCon. And that's going to be one of the highlights of this on the road feature. Now, without spilling the beans completely, all I will say is CattleFax is projecting those 550-pound steers to be up another $30 this year.
Woo. Well, that's good news.
That's great news.
I know we wish we had our cattle herds of yesteryear, but these prices definitely do help. So that's going to be great to see that update. You know, Russ, we're also going to catch up with a leader that's familiar to many of us in Western Ag Network country that just became elected to the board of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and also some pasture management tools along the way with our friends at Envu.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, for ranchers, whether it's in Western Ag Network country or somewhere else in this great country of ours, when you're raising beef, it's all about maximizing that pasture, range, and forage, and get more pounds on those critters.
Hey, speaking of pasture, range, and forage insurance, our friends at AgRisk Advisors have been bringing you this coverage from Orlando all week long. Check them out online for all the risk management tools, because AgRisk Advisors is with you no matter the weather. So hey, let's not hold back anymore. I know friends want to hear more about this CattleFax report from here at CattleCon.
Well, one of the highlights each year here at CattleCon is the opportunity for cattle producers from across this great country of ours to have that opportunity to come together and hear informative speakers and walk away with some useful information and maybe some new tools to take back home and help them become just a little bit more profitable. And of course, one of the highlights every year is the CattleFax market and weather outlook, and also having the opportunity during the trade show to stop by the CattleFax booth and visit with all the experts there and do exactly that. Now, joining us from CattleFax is their Chief Executive Officer, Randy Blach. And Randy, I think the storyline here at this year's convention in Orlando, Florida, continues to be the overall beef cow inventory number and just where that sits and how that's going to continue to drive the cattle market, at least for the near term and maybe a little bit longer. What did USDA's inventory report show us this week?
Well, I would just say that there were not any surprises. I mean, for those of us that watch the numbers on a daily basis, we've watched what these cow harvest levels have looked like through the years. We've watched the number of heifers that we've been placing on feed and not retaining for our breeding herds. I felt like the numbers really lined up very well. Very few surprises. The industry is not expanding yet. I mean, quite frankly, we've only had 1 year of profitability for cow-calf producers, so we shouldn't have expected rapid expansion, but we have seen no expansion other than some regional pockets. Nationwide, it's not happening. So I think as we look at this next year, we'll start to see a little more intentional heifer retention, herd rebuilding take place. We'll have a very strong year for prices for cow-calf producers, so we'll see calf prices and feeder prices continue to push higher. So I think there will be an economic incentive to go ahead and keep a few more heifers back.
You know, as we look at those calf and yearling prices for the coming year, what is your analysis and what numbers have your team put together, I guess, as far as what they're going to look like to give these producers out there an idea?
Well, I think if we're looking at calf prices across the country, we're looking at a 5.5 weight calf, we're going to average close to $3. You know, for an annual average, you know, you'll see some swinging around these numbers. I think it's important that everybody recognize that plus or minus 10% is the way these markets move. We can see a pretty big move. We just saw it in the last 3 months, didn't we? Mm-hmm. So I would say around $3 on calves, $2.90 to $3 for an annual average. Obviously, they're going to be stout going into spring grazing because there's just not enough of them out there. Feeder cattle prices on an 8.5 weight steer around 240 for an annual average. So both those classes of cattle are substantially higher. And for the fed cattle producers out there, I would say we're looking at another $8 to $10 a hundred increase in annual average fed cattle prices, getting up here where we average 184, 185, somewhere in that neighborhood for the year. So some pretty good numbers. We haven't been at those price levels in history, any time in history, and there is a lot of other competing protein on the market. So, we're going to get tested by that. There's plenty of supply of pork and poultry out there we'll have to digest as well.
As you mentioned, we haven't quite seen that herd expansion really develop yet. Producers kind of maybe holding back just to see a little bit where this market is possibly headed. But as you alluded to, we could start to see, a few more heifers retained and folks actually starting to think about that. So what's your guys' outlook for the bred female market, this year and into 2025 for folks that might be looking at either selling or buying, bred heifers or young stock cows?
If I look through the fourth quarter of the year and into early 2024, I would put a range around where these higher quality bred heifers have traded here through the central northern plains region of the U.S., the West, a full range of about 2,400 to 3,000. And I would say the bulk of them averaged in here 25, 26, 2,700. My guess is that price level is going to continue to move higher as we push forward. Relatively speaking, with calf prices at the levels they are, the value of a bred heifer is historically on the low end of the range of what you would see from a ratio standpoint. So I think they'll move higher. We'll see some more intentional expansion. The problem we have is 10% interest is holding people back. It's a big deal. If you got a $3,000 bred heifer and you got 10% interest and you're borrowing that money, that's a big coupon that you're behind right out of the box. So that's going to slow the rate of we won't see a herd expansion, in my opinion, of anywhere near the swiftness of what we saw in 2014 and 2015. And quite frankly, I do believe that's one of the big obstacles for many producers. They remember how fast this market came off those highs from 15 and 16. I mean, if you expanded to 15, by the fall of 16, those cattle were worth half as much. So,
yeah, I mean, that is a very good point. And I think too, maybe a little bit, producers been holding back, I guess, a little bit too, just to see where these input costs are going. I mean, what in the area of like feedstuffs, I mean, what are you hearing from, some of your customers that are, the hay producers out there, the corn growers, what are they telling you as far as available supply this year, to get more available feedstuffs into the hands of these producers?
Last year was a great rebuilding year to start rebuilding our hay stocks, and we had much improved moisture situation from the central plains north. So we really increased those hay stocks. Hay prices started to really reflect that into the fall and in the winter. Grain prices, we're about $3 a bushel cheaper on the cost of corn into the bunk today than we were a year ago. So corn prices, we just came off a record production of 15.3 billion bushels. I think we'll have another big crop this next year. So our stocks, U.S. and global stocks on corn, would really suggest that we're going to keep these grain prices. I would say more in a range of like $4 to $5.50 corn will be the typical range that we'll see in 2024. And that contrasts to $7.50 to $8.50 corn we were looking at a year ago in a number of these areas. So significant relief in the cost structure.
Hey, last question. I mean, we could literally stay here all day and talk about the markets and the weather forecast and things of that sort. But At the end of the day, you know, obviously a big driver for prices too is what consumers ultimately choose at the meat case, and with low beef cow numbers and just, you know, as we talk about just overall supply and demand. I mean, kind of talked about it earlier, but I guess where are we at with overall beef demand, and do you see consumers, even with those competing proteins out there, this year and into 2025 and beyond? I mean, are U.S. consumers still going to buy U.S. beef?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about it. The data is very clear that U.S. consumers love the taste of beef, and they love and are willing to pay for high quality marbled beef. We've seen a significant increase in the number of choice and prime. If we go back to 2000, 50% of the cattle were choice and prime carcasses at that time. In the last 3 years, 83% of the cattle have graded choice and prime. And the spreads have stayed record large, haven't they?
Yeah.
So it tells you very clearly that consumers are willing to pay a little more to get the higher quality, better tasting product. I think as our industry will stay focused on putting that quality of product out there, our consumers will stay with us. Now we're testing them because there's a lot of other protein out here, but again, as we go through cycles, prices are going to have to get high enough to ration that smaller supply that we have out there, and unfortunately, that's just the way markets work. So,
Well, we appreciate all of your useful and
my pleasure.
very informative information. Again, we've been visiting with Randy Blach, the Chief Executive Officer of CattleFax, just one of the many newsmakers here at CattleCon24 that this year's attendees here in Orlando, Florida, have had the opportunity to hear from. Again, for more of this very useful and informative analysis from Randy and his entire team at CattleFax, you can always visit them online at CattleFax.com.
Ready for a real PRF partner?
He was willing to track us for a year and provide that data back to us for a year. That's a guy making a pretty big investment.
At AgRisk Advisors, this isn't our first rodeo. We are one of the most experienced in pasture rangeland forage. Honesty, commitment, trust. Many companies use these words. At AgRisk Advisors, we earn them.
As we continue our conversations on the road this week, brought to you by AgRisk Advisors, a new leader has emerged to represent cattle producers across Western Ag Network country. Now, he's a name and voice familiar to many in our region. It's past president of the Montana Stock Growers Association, Mr. Jim Steinbeisser of Sidney, Montana, just elected Region 5 Vice President. And Jim, first off, congratulations on your new election to this position. You just wrapped up your time as the president of the Montana Stock Growers just about a year ago. I mean, what drives you to be a volunteer leader?
You know, actually, it comes from my dad. He had that passion. I still do. We just grew up that way, just with a desire to serve the industry that we love. And so it's in my blood, you might say. You know, I've worked with all these issues, or many of these issues, through the last several years. And with that experience and background, why not just keep going?
And of course, as you step into this position, there's a lot of issues that are impacting Montana ranchers, federal lands issues, profitability, always a top concern, drought, price of cattle. I guess, what are some of the few things that you hope to accomplish serving as the Region 5 Vice President, but also continuing to be a voice not only for Montana producers, but all the western states that make up Region 5?
Well, all those issues, Lane, endangered species, you can add to that. The federal government acquiring more and more private property, I find very troubling. And, you know, in my speech today, I said that you know, we're really good at going on the defense. NCBA has shown they know how to do offense, and I want to encourage more of that. Offense is way more fun and way more impactful, so maybe we can do some more of that.
And I guess, what is your message to producers watching this, whether they're in Montana, Colorado, Wyoming, or the various states that Western Ag Network represents, about the importance of not just complaining about a topic down at the stockyards or the cafe or on Facebook, but about being involved in just making sure that their concern is addressed through policy on a county, state, and national level?
Absolutely, Lane. In our caucus that we just came out of, some of the ideas that are coming from these various affiliates in our region, it's just incredible. I mean, there's people problem solving and working out our problems, which is there's not a lot of us. We're we're trying to be dictated to by the majority of how to operate, and so we need to get together, be united, listen to each other, and solve these problems.
Well, I know you traveled a lot as the Montana Stock Growers President, from Sydney to Helena and everywhere in between for the state of Montana. You're going to have a few more miles to put on here as the Region 5 Vice President. But congratulations, and a big accomplishment for yourself and to your family. But thank you for your service, and good luck for the next few years in this position.
Thank you, Lane.
Well, again, friends, we're going to have more of these conversations brought to you by AgRisk Advisors from CattleCon here in Orlando. Again, a lot of big topics being covered this week, and we'll have them here on the Western Ag Network.
Well, each year here at CattleCon, the NCBA trade show truly does feature some of the latest, greatest in products, services, and technology for the U.S. beef cattle industry. And this year, here in Orlando, Florida, it wasn't any different. Now, one of this year's trade show exhibitors was Envu, and joining us from Envu is our friend Justin Hossfeld from Sheridan, Wyoming. And it's always a great opportunity here at CattleCon and the NCBA convention truly to come together, mix and mingle a little bit, and meet some new friends, and of course catch up with some old ones too, even a few of us from back home.
That's right. And we thank you for the opportunity, Russell. And we're excited to bring the new technology and the support that we want to bring to the ranching industry.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about what's going on these days with Envu. And of course, the bottom line with you folks is helping ranchers, not just in the West, but truly across America, you know, maximize their range and their range productivity and getting more utilization out of that forage for their cattle. But before we talk about some of the herbicides that are helping ranchers do exactly that, I know you said you've been visiting with cattle producers here in Orlando this week about RangeView. Tell us more.
You bet. So not only do we want to sell quality herbicides that really help solve problems and elevate the range and pasture space, but we want to help them after the sale. We really want to invest in that total outcome and make them as successful as we can be. And so that's where RangeView comes in. RangeView is a digital platform, but it's also a decision-making tools and gives them the data and the information to be the most informed as they manage their ranch.
You know, just talk us through some of the highlights, Justin, of RangeView. I mean, you rolled it out a couple of years ago and you showed me at, I'm not even sure what CattleCon it was, but I mean, I thought it was pretty cool then. And your son just showed me the latest version of it here. And you guys have even added more bells and whistles to make it even more useful and informative and for those ranchers out there.
That's right. Our first introduction of RangeView, we were a digital scouting and mapping tool, so that we know range and pasture is a very broad and geographic space. And even though we know our pastures well, we're in them every day, still getting that inventory and that true fine knowledge of where your strengths and your weaknesses lie, that was our passion then. And we were able to do that and then make the most out of the use of our herbicides. But now what we're bringing more decision-making tools. So we have dashboards so you can monitor weather, you can monitor the amount of forage that you have in the pasture, you can monitor where you're at in that utilization of that forage. Are you at that take half, leave half? Are you really being a good steward of that? But even beyond being a good steward, it's now helping you maximize your use of that resource. So you're putting the most equity back and getting the most return out of that as we can get.
Well, and are you finding in your conversations with cattle producers when you attend conferences like this in Orlando, or even, you know, more regional ones in different parts of America, when you have more one-on-one time with these cattle producers, that they're not running away from technology like this. Both young and old truly are embracing it, aren't they?
They are. And you and I have talked in the past about, there's ranching for profit, and there's a lot of platforms out there that tell you that you need to work on the business instead of working in the business. But we all know we're going to work in the business. There's not a lot of free labor out there for us. We're always trying to manage costs. So we're trying to make ourselves more efficient to where we can be part of that footprint on the ground, but then make sure we don't miss any opportunities. And all generations are starting to see that I need to make myself as efficient as I can be. And we've really enjoyed during our time here how many of the more experienced ranchers, if you will, are showing up at our booth saying, we know we need this help. It's really not our strength. It's not something that we grew up in, but we know that we need it. And it allows you to work in the business, yet have that knowledge to work on the business as well.
Well, I think for all of us involved with the beef cattle industry, whether it's in agribusiness or on the ground producers or even in farm broadcasting, Justin, it's easy for all of us to be profitable during record cattle
That's
markets.
right.
But as you've been mentioning, we truly have to start managing and utilizing this type of technology for when that cattle cycle goes back down and things aren't as high as they are right now.
That's right, and it may even be drought. We have all these forces pulling on us, and a lot of times as ranchers, we're looking at all the different ways we can manage risk, because really that's a lot of what we do is managing the risk. We're managing risk for animal health, we're managing the risk for profitability, we're managing the risk of getting our work done, and this gives you that ability to have that resource in its best condition and as a risk management platform so you can draw from it when you need to.
Well, it is truly some exciting technology, and I encourage folks to check out RangeView, and you can do so by visiting the website rangeview.envu.us. Don't worry, at the end of this segment, we're gonna pass along that website again. But I also want to spend a few minutes, Justin, talking about the bread and butter of Envu too, and that's your herbicide portfolio for range and pasture for cattle producers.
That's right. We're very proud of what we brought to it. So when what we want to do is we want to bring herbicides that are actually very focused on the species you need to deal with. A lot of times herbicides can be fairly broad spectrum. What we're doing is we're really zeroing in on the site of action, the mode of action, and removing that pest while not impeding the opportunity for the perennials and the desirable species to flourish and grow. But we're very proud that we're bringing it all across the industry. We have some great, very key products for the West that you and I have talked about in the past, but we also have a product called Envu that works very well on mesquite and weisach in the South, and we have Resilon that works really well in the hay market in the South and clear over here to the Southeast. So we're trying to help all facets of the ranching industry be more profitable and elevate their operation.
For those of us that do call the West home, I mean, one of those profit-robbing range weeds out there, or species, maybe is how I should put it, has always been cheatgrass. And
That's right.
and you're tackling, species like cheatgrass and Medusa head and ventinata and a whole lot of others with Rejuver.
That's right. Rejuver has been a very exciting tool that we brought to the West. We've been battling those invasive grasses for years. And with cheatgrass, we could find some value in the spring and find some value in the fall. But as ventinata and Medusa had moved in and such a high silica content, we can't even graze those. And so we can't even get value out of them. They really start to degrade the rangeland. But with Rejuver, we now attack them from a new site. We remove the seed from the soil seed bank. We last up to 4 years, which actually gives us the ability to exhaust that soil seed bank. But all the while, we're releasing new forbs and new species to get that true ration on the range.
Anything else about Envu and how you're helping cattle producers across America, utilize their forage and their range and their pasture lands and getting the most out of that? And of course, at the end of the day, hopefully putting more pounds of beef on those animals and pounds of beef on consumers' plates?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing we like to let everybody know is we're a partner with you. We're selling you herbicides. They're great herbicides. We're providing you RangeView to help manage the outcome of that, but thought leadership. We have We have a stewardship team. We have a government stewardship team that can help you get grants, help you in a grant writing process, to bring in some funding to help you make those investments. We don't have a lot of free cash in the livestock or in the ag industry. And so when we can leverage other monies to make us more successful, we want to help you with that. But it's just being your partner from the beginning to the end is our real goal.
Hey, that's pretty awesome. Justin, thanks for giving me a little bit of your time here at CattleCon24 in Orlando.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Again, we've been visiting with Justin Hossfeld with Envu, talking about their portfolio of herbicide products, again, helping ranchers across America maximize their forage, range, and pasture lands, and of course, talking about that new and exciting technology called RangeView. We've just scratched, really, or even touched the tip of the iceberg about what these folks at Envu have to offer America's cattlemen and cattlewomen. I would invite you to check them out online for more information about everything and more that we've talked about today by visiting rangeview.envu.us. Well, Lane, as they say in the industry, that's a wrap from here at CattleCon24 in Orlando, Florida. But we can't forget to mention it's never too early to start making plans for CattleCon25 next year, headed for the Lone Star State in San Antonio.
Remember the Alamo.
Exactly. Remember the Alamo.
And Russ, for all of our friends at home that have joined us for these on-the-road conversations, we have more that are yet to come that we weren't able to get out there. So make sure and follow along on all of our Western Ag Network social media channels. It's a great time down here. We have a lot of informative discussions that we had with stakeholders down here in Orlando. So on behalf of the entire Western Ag Network team, I'm Lane Nordlund. We'll catch you next time, friends.
Western Ag Network on the road in Orlando, Florida for the Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show. Brought to you by AgRisk Advisors.